Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to episode number 2 of My Thoughts Don't Matter. Today, I'm going to talk about the entire NIP situation, what I think about that. So again, please leave your thoughts down below. First, I want to address the Maikelele situation. As many of you guys know, a couple days ago, NIP did pick up Pith again as their permanent fifth member. They say their permanent fifth. He is coming back from an injury, which is not carpal tunnel, but something almost as serious as that. He will not need surgery. He said about 2 weeks ago he needed a month of recovery. So he's almost fully recovered. At least we can assume he is. And if he's not, we're really not sure where NIP is going to go in the future. So this is pretty much my basis. This entire video will be dedicated to telling you guys why I'm pretty sure, and you guys should be reassured as well, that we will not see this same 5-man roster with Pith in it for the next E-League Major. Now, whether they replace Pith or someone else in the lineup, which I think would maybe exist, you could probably, make a good argument to replace that man as well. But I do want to convince you guys, first off, I want to talk about Maikelele and that whole Pith situation along with Disco Doplin. So I'm sure many of you guys know about the whole Pith injury, which happened several months ago, and we had Maikelele debut after Disco Doplin had just a few weeks with the team. So first off, I want to go to the details of maybe why NIP offered Disco Doplin in the first place. If you guys did not hear about this, let's set the real basis for this whole story and this whole argument here is NIP and a former Epsilon member, a former Epsilon teammate of Disco Doplin, that is Draken. As many of you guys know, we have Disco Doplin on Fnatic now, so that's why I say former teammate. Draken came out with HLTV and he said that apparently Disco Doplin had offers both from Fnatic as well as NIP up through ESWC, that tournament there about a month ago, where Epsilon did not perform too well. They placed top half, top 16 of the 32 teams there, but not an astounding or astonishing performance there from them. And that's apparently when NIP withdrew their offer from Disco Doplin. But people were still very surprised that Disco Doplin received an offer in the first place. So if you guys do not know, Disco Doplin had 4 weeks of the team. They were all ESL Pro League weeks. They played a total of 10 matches. They went 7-3. Disco Doplin, though, I believe 3 of those matches, 1 or 2 of them being a loss, he actually did top frag. So he's one of those talents where you might think, okay, if NIP is going to offer him, it's because he has that starstruck talent. He has the opportunity or the ability to maybe go 30 plus frags, 25 plus frags. That is something that Maikelele really lacked. So let's go into, there's really not much to go over about Disco Doplin. Again, 7-3 throughout those 10 matches. 2 or 3 of those matches he top fragged and kind of broke out. As you could see, he can be a flashy guy. Now, he is not an opper, though, which is very curious to see because you had Forrest taking over that opping role when Disco Doplin was in the team, maybe now and again. But Forrest was that secondary opper, not really a primary opper for that team, but still took over a majority of the time. And now we have Maikelele come in, as many of you guys know, a long time ago. One of the main reasons, or not necessarily a reason he left FaZe, but after he left FaZe Clan, he wanted to be a primary opper. And so when he came into NIP, you saw him and Forrest kind of back and forthing with those oppositions. Now, Maikelele, though, not really a starstruck talent. One of the reasons why I really think NIP couldn't offer this guy is because he didn't have 25 plus frag games. Although he had a few of them, he wasn't breaking 30 frags. He didn't show the flashes that Disco Doplin may have shown. Now, again, I really don't think that NIP should have offered either of these guys, but let's really discuss Maikelele in detail here because many of you guys know I do like him a lot, and he had some great successes with this lineup in the past few months. So he did start 2 months ago. This is SLI, or Starlighter Season 2, the finals there, and NIP won this event. Now, this was 2 full months ago, but there were great teams here. I believe of the top 10, there were 8 top 10 teams here. Navi was here, Virtus Pro, SK. All these great teams were here. Now, all those teams also did not place very well in groups, but it did turn out to be NIP who won this overall event, and that was Maikelele's debut, so people thought, okay, it's going to be a great start. Now we go on, a couple weekends ago to ESL Pro League Finals. They unfortunately went out in the semifinals there. Another great performance, though. If you say a 3rd to 4th place finish, I say a good finish there for NIP, a team who consistently got out of groups and consistently made out of quarterfinals with Maikelele on their roster. They finished 3rd, 4th there after losing to SK Gaming. They took them to a 3rd map in a best of 3, and again, not really a close 3rd map there, but still a good performance out of them at ESL Pro League Finals. That's their 2nd event with Maikelele. Then we take it back to last weekend. We'll touch on Epicenter later on. Not really one of their better performances. So we take it back to last weekend. Again, this is all with Maikelele. E-League Season 2 Group B with Maikelele on the roster. They did make it out along with Virtus Pro, and again, quite easily. They took down G2 not once in a best of 1, but also twice in a best of 3. They swept them, and really convincing. That was where you guys saw, G2 member, I think it was Scream or Shocks, who just came out and said, hey, by the way, like, NIP is better than us. We can't beat them. And so a really convincing performance there. And then the one lacking performance, I would say, from the team in general, I think there were multiple performances by Maikelele where you could have said, okay, he cannot be an NIP offered player. But that would be Epicenter. Epicenter was where they failed to make out of groups. As many of you guys probably know, though, they actually tied with Na'Vi. This came down to the tiebreaker, which is a round differential, so they really got screwed over there. I think if they did make it out of groups there, definitely could have been easily automatically a quarterfinal team and easily could have been a semifinal team there as well. And that was the one lacking performance with Maikelele on the roster. So you could definitely argue that, with Maikelele on this roster, they had some great achievements. They've been a consistent team. You could definitely argue a top 5 team in the world because of their consistency. They're very consistent in making it to semifinal matches. Do they make it to the finals? Not very often, but they consistently make out of groups, which a lot of teams like Australis really struggle with. G2 struggles with. So this team is a consistent roster, but you really could argue as well. With Disco Dopeland, they could have had the same accomplishments. And with both these players, both Disco and Maikelele, they're not flashy and they're not risky. You know that if you have these guys in your roster, yes, you could succeed. You could make a semifinal, you could make a quarterfinal quite easily because you're a top 5 consistent team with obviously people like Get Right. Without Get Right and I believe Forrest and Freiburg being your top 3, because of them, you're a consistent team no matter what. And whoever you fill in the background can really make you just a consistent team no matter what. But it's when those top 3 players, when Get Right had terrible games, when Forrest and Freiburg, I say Get Right is definitely my number 1 player for NIP right now, with Forrest and Freiburg kind of dwindling that second and third, but you can switch them back and forth. But especially when Get Right and those two do not do well, you saw that NIP really struggled. So kind of a rarity here, though, because most of these top tier teams do have duos instead of these trios. I think NIP kind of a rarity there. They have 3 very strong players. Of course, you compare them to SK or Virtus Pro, who have arguably the same amount of strong players. Virtus Pro probably 4 strong players there. But anyway, getting off topic here, I do really believe that I think NIP is going to offer someone else one of their 5th member spots. Now, who that 5th member will be, I really cannot tell you. I think that IEM Oakland will be a big trial period for this team. So you have Pith coming back. If you saw his announcement, they didn't sound very confident. They said he must be desperate to get back to the game. So it didn't sound like he was back in full practice mode. He's still playing FPL, definitely not full time or 8 hours, 12 hours a day. And I really honestly believe, guys, he's not going to come back and be in the same form he was when he was first in this team or, on this team 3 months ago. I really do not believe that. Now, if he does somehow come back and perform to a good tier and actually can stick with the team, I then think NIP will look towards Exist. If you look through the last 2 months, guys, Exist is definitely their weakest link. Now, who they're going to replace him with, that's where it comes into question. If you really look around the scene right now, if you believe, like I believe, a lot of these teams, you go from North America to South America to all these European, Swedish, Norway, Danish teams, they all like to trade within their own region because, of course, you have to have the majority to keep on competing. But still, no matter what, even if these guys already have 3 or 4 players, a good majority of their players from their home country, they still look in that home country to get new players. And so I really think this team, NIP roster, is going to look at Epsilon for some people. So dependent upon who they actually decide to replace, if they decide to go with a secondary/main opera role and kind of take that op away from Forrest, I think they still look for both players to come from Epsilon. So let's say, for an instance, they kick Exist or Pith after a trial period or a short few tournaments where they don't do well, especially if they do not do well at IEM Oakland. I think if they don't finish top 8 at least, which I really do believe they can, but if they have like a breakout terrible performance, I really believe they're going to try and pick up maybe an opper, which that would be Draken from Epsilon. If you guys have not heard about this guy, the same guy from teammate of Disco Dopeland, former teammate of Disco Dopeland, who leaked that Disco had offers from NIP and Fnatic, this guy has gone off. You look at the past maybe month and a half, him alongside a rifler known as Rez have been the reason why Epsilon has been doing so well. Now, this also coincides with my next story. Let's say, again, you kick Pith or Exist, one or the other, and you definitely, certainly in that case, do need a rifler. Then you look at Rez. Rez is the star. He broke out this past weekend, and that was in the PGL European Minor. Top fragged almost every game alongside Draken. It was one of those two most of the time. And this guy can rifle. Now, of course, they're playing against Tier 2 teams, but in this PGL European Minor, they were playing teams like Godsend or Hellraisers, Space Soldiers, LDLC, the teams that made it out of groups, and especially were good talents, among the top of Tier 2 teams. And this guy can rifle. He went off. There were several tweets about this guy. And this Epsilon roster is definitely a surprise. They were not supposed to be a top 3 team, especially after losing Disco at this PGL European Minor. So I really do believe, guys, in the future, if NIP cannot keep up with this consistency, and if they are really looking to take a risk, I think the reason why they're not going with Disco, or I guess Disco kind of that offer faded away. I think the reason why they're not looking to offer Maikelele is because there's really no flashy talent there. I love Maikelele. He seems like a great guy. He's a fan favorite, but there's you know what you're gonna get. You're not gonna get a guy who's gonna carry you to tier 1 or the number 1 in the world. He really probably not going to do that. You can see that by his performances. But if they really wanted to take a risk on a rifler or an opper, Draken and Rez, I really do believe that very, very soon NIP will look at these guys and think, okay, let's give them a shot. Let's kick exists. Let's give Pith a break. They wouldn't announce it like, oh, we're kicking both these guys. They would put them on inactive rosters because they both have contracts, I'm sure. But look in the future, guys, NIP to replace their opper. They don't really have a current primary opper, but look in the future for NIP to replace a rifler or an opper role on their actual starting roster, and that to be Draken or Rez. I promise you guys, these guys have a future in Tier 1 of CSGO, and NIP changes should be coming soon.